Hello again. In this lab, we're going to work with some of the manual overrides that are available on any of our Boolean writable points. If I right-click on my global occupancy point and go to the action menu here, I have all of the manual overrides available to me that are built into this writable point. I have emergency active, emergency inactive, emergency auto, active, inactive, auto, and set. I'm going to just click on emergency active and see what happens. Notice my point turned purple. Purple means overridden. That's a status color. We'll see different status colors throughout the course. And I'd kind of like to see a better representation of what's going on. So I'm going to double click my global occupancy point and take a look and see what's happening. If you remember from the last lab, I said that the out slot scans all the in slots and sets itself to whatever it sees first. So right now, input 1 says occupied. So it sets itself to occupied, tells me that it's overridden at priority 1. We refer to this as the priority array. Input 2 is null. Input 8 is null. Input 16 has my schedule coming in. And the fallback or default slot says null. So I'm going to go through all of the actions and we'll watch what happens on this property sheet. Take note of how these things work. I will right click my global occupancy point here. I don't have to go back to the wire sheet to do that. I'll go to actions and I'm going to click on emergency inactive. Second one down on the list. It immediately went to unoccupied at 1. So even though my schedule is telling it to be occupied, the higher priority emergency level override says go unoccupied. There is nothing else that will bring this point on. This is unoccupied forever. It doesn't matter if you stop your station, restart your station, copy your station, do anything else, this point stays. This is what is referred to as a persistent slot. So this override stays there. The only way to release this override is to come back to actions and invoke the emergency auto action, and that releases that override at input 1. Let's take a look at the active. When I hit active, it prompts me for a duration. So this basically in plain English is saying, hey, how long do you want this override to be active? Instead of permanent, I may select a minute, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. This is just for convenience. They have some built-in times for you. I can go to custom and put in whatever time that I want. I'm just going to select a minute and say OK. You see which input slot went true or went to occupied? Input 8. If I want to release this before the time runs out, I can come up here to actions, select auto, and it will release input 8 override. Let me put an unoccupied override on that slot. I'll go to inactive and I'll choose permanent. So it's telling me it's unoccupied overridden at 8. This is pretty much the same thing as that override that I had at input 1. This is going to stay there forever because I told it to be permanent. The schedule is not going to be able to control this point because it's at a lower priority than input 8. Let me go in now and override the emergency active to get it to come back on. So this is what's going to happen in the real world. When you leave both sets of actions in here, the emergency level actions and the operator actions, you're going to see two sets of overrides on points. We will address this in a later lab. What I'll do now is release the overrides. A common misconception is that if I come in here and I select the emergency auto or the auto, it releases everything. That's not true. This is one entire set of actions, and this is one entire set of actions. They don't interact with each other. So in order to clear level 1 or priority 1 actions, I have to select the emergency auto. You'll see that priority 1 goes away, but priority 8 stays. So I need to come in here, go to actions, and select the auto action, and that releases input 8, and now it's following the schedule again. The only other action that's left is the set action. And before I click the set action, I want you to focus here on the fallback slot. Fallback is also referred to as the default for a point. If we talk about, setting some default set points or setting a default value for something, we're talking about the fallback slot. I want you to pay attention to what happens with the fallback slot. I'll come up here to actions and I'll use the set action, and I will set this point to be occupied as a default. That way, if anything happens to any of the input slots above it, at least the point will fall back to occupied. Hit OK. And now I've got occupied in the fallback slot. At this point, I want to go back to my wire sheet to prepare myself for the next lab.